controversial statement. I think Alan Moore is pretty darn influential to comic books. Unless you're a person who just worships multi-billion-dollar corporations and everything they do, I think his influence and his ability is undeniable. Watchmen has been nonstop examined over and over again. To be fair, it's flippin' great, and there is a reason why. But Alan Moore has a vast and pretty wonderful collection of books, and I feel his other stuff sadly gets underrepresented. I said that wrong, I think, but I'm going to go with it. One of my favorite things he ever worked on was a collaboration with another wide-spanning and influential artist that you may have heard of, Rob Liefeld. So I have some young people in my audience who might not know who Rob Liefeld is. Probably best known today for creating Deadpool, but best known in my heart for being responsible for this picture. Liefeld is an incredibly important guy in the history of comic books. It was him and a couple of other artists who broke away from Marvel to form Image Comics, which was one of the first serious attempts to actually break the duology of comic books, with stuff like Youngblood. It also led to decent stuff like Spawn, or straight-up masterpiece like The Max. But it also led to today's subject, Supreme. Supreme started out as, well, that's a good question. He was a Liefeld creation. Generally, he didn't really have a set origin. At one point, he was a genetically engineered super soldier. Then he was a angel sent to Earth to redeem sinners. The most important thing, though, was he was an edgy ripoff of Superman. Pretty much it. Superman, but edgy in 90s. So when Moore was brought in, he decided he would take this character that had no backstory, no character, and nobody seemed to really care about, and reboot him. He turned him into Superman, but Silver Age Superman, but with writing in line with more modern audiences. So let's take a look at this first issue that the title promised. Although this is a fairly sincere tribute to Silver Age Superman, Moore can't let go of some of his tricks, and you'll see a big thing he does. And before we go any further, the way I set this all up implies that this was an Image comic, and it is, but it also isn't. And it's because of a bunch of backroom corporate dealings that are really confusing, and I have trouble totally understanding. But no, this went through about 4 or 5 different publishers, but it was always Liefeld at the center. Moving on to the actual story. So we start a story kind of in media res with our buddy here, Supreme, returning to Earth to find it double visioned and everybody frozen. This is endlessly confusing to Supreme because he's just been fighting with Loki. From the way he talks, it sounds like he's been going through the TV show Sliders, where he's been appearing in different universes over and over again. But this world is different and strange because everybody seems frozen. And it gets really different when it's revealed a bunch of other Supremes meet him. What's going on here? He doesn't know, and he just starts punching them. Till our Supreme gets punched out by Squeak the Supreme Mouse. Then that a giant portal opens up, and we're taken to the land of 1,000 Supremes. This is where we get to the metatextual, oh, this is definitely an Alan Moore written universe itself, and in the world of Image, is constantly refitting itself. And this constant refitting itself happens whenever a new Supreme shows up. In the Citadel Supreme, where they live a happy and peaceful life with every version of themselves, with their old supporting cast, including what I am assuming is a character from the original Supreme comics. Full disclosure, I've actually never read the original run of Supreme. I assume this is him pretty much writing out all the old characters. This is a fun meta thing, though, because one of the things he talks about is that when the universe is close to resetting itself, it adds a bunch of new characters to try and save it. So this is pretty much the universe that forgotten, recanted characters end up. And you see these white and gold versions of Supreme here. That is a deep cut reference to a Superman thing. This specifically, and should look at that run someday. That's a whole lot of stupid right there. This version of Ethan Crane didn't even really exist till a few moments ago. He just popped into existence. One thing I like about this is they give him the option. If he just wants to stay in the Citadel, he can choose the life of a Citadel. But of course he doesn't, because he's the hero. He walks into his version of reality, where Ethan Crane is a comic book artist working on the hit series Omni-Man. What's going to be part of this series is that there's a very meta-textual references to everything. And Ethan and his version of Lois Lane work in the comic industry. The first issue ends with Ethan deciding to learn what his childhood actually was now in Little Haven. That's how the first issue of this ends. In some ways, it's about Ethan reconnecting with old friends and that he never knew existed and reclaiming his past that he thought was lost, which is all great and wonderful. And metatextually, which I feel is fair because the story is very meta, It's about Alan Moore trying to rebuild what he loved about superhero comics, moving all the stiltedness of Silver Age comics, bringing an intentional lightness of tone, not a, oh god, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm going to have to figure out who made Jimmy Olsen a giant turtle man. I guess it was Atlantis, even though that wasn't mentioned ever before. Replace that with likable characters, funny writing, and heartwarming stories about what it's like to connect with people again. Some people just never want to read a Rob Liefeld thing, but he doesn't do the art the whole time, by the way. But I can't recommend this enough. I love the series so much, and I hopefully eventually we'll get around to covering more in the series.